Palestine. We all followed and saw what happened in Gaza during the past days and weeks, and how many martyrs were murdered at the hand of the Israeli occupation in a brutal and inhuman way. This is not the first time that Gaza has been exposed to violent aggression in this way. Throughout the history of Palestine, Gaza has been subjected to strikes and attacks from the Israeli occupation authorities. But first, let us know how we arrived at this current situation and how Israel occupied Palestine in the first place. The idea of Israeli settlement began in the West, who wanted to gather the Jews in Europe and the world in one place. Perhaps this idea came to light from the days of Napoleon Bonaparte's French campaign in 1799, in which he invited the Jews of Asia and Africa to join his campaign and recruited. There were a large number of them in his army. However, Napoleon's defeat prevented him from implementing this plan, and this idea appeared again, and many Western leaders and senior Jews began to be interested in it and established associations and organizations demanding a special homeland for the Jews. The actual planning of the plan began at the hands of Theodor Herzl, the Zionist leader, in the year 1896, who held the Basel Conference in Switzerland in the year 1897 and said in it, "We are laying the foundation stone for building the house that will house the Jewish nation." He proposed a program calling for encouraging travel to Palestine and obtaining international recognition of the legitimacy of the resettlement. One of the decisions of the conference was the establishment of the World Zionist Organization to achieve the goal of the Zionist plan. The Jews at that time studied the situation of the colonizers and found that Britain was the most suitable country that could fulfill their desires. Let me tell you that the Jewish Zionist propaganda promoted to us that the Palestinians were the ones who sold their land to the Jews, and that the Jews bought it with their money, and that the Palestinians do not have the right to demand it again. Zionist propaganda in its beginnings and since the 19th century focused on the idea of promoting a land without a people to a people without a land, and considered that there is no people in Palestine, and that the Jews who don't have a land have the right to take a land there. But they are, from a moment their presence in Palestine, found it full of vitality and activity, and there lived hard-working people rooted in their land. The funny thing is that in the last decade of the 19th century, Nrgo, one of the senior leaders of the Zionist movement, sold 2 rabbis to Herzl to prepare a report to present at the Zionist Congress on the particular possibility of immigrating to Palestine. After they returned, they wrote a report in which they said Palestine is a beautiful bride and she fulfills all the conditions, but she's actually married, meaning there was a people living in it and it's not a land without people. We may have heard in recent years about the Palestinian resistance, but people do not know that the Palestinian resistance to Jewish settlement in Palestine began a very long time ago, perhaps from the beginning of the Jewish immigration during the days of the Ottoman Empire. Clashes occurred between Palestinian farmers and Jewish settlers. In 1886, senior Palestinian leaders in Jerusalem on June 24, 1891 submitted a petition to the Prime Minister of the Ottoman Empire, in which they demanded preventing the immigration of Russian Jews to Palestine and prohibiting their ownership of lands there. However, Palestinian scholars and representatives and Palestinian newspapers at that time warned of the danger of Jewish settlement and demanded strict measures to confront it. In 1897, Sheikh Muhammad Tahir al-Husseini, the Mufti of Jerusalem, headed a local body to scrutinize requests to transfer ownership in Jerusalem and prevent the transfer of many lands to the Jews. Sheikh Suleiman al-Taji al-Faruqi, who founded the Ottoman National Party in 1911, had a role in warning of the Zionist danger, and so did the freedom fighters Yusuf al-Khaldi, Rawi al-Khaldi, Saeed al-Husseini, and Najib Nasser, all of whom were scholars and sheikhs of Palestine at that time. During this period, the Jews began immigrating to Palestine at a time when Palestine was under the British mandate, and because of immigration, the Jews were destined to form a state within the state, and the British government was protecting them from Muslims and the resistance at that time, until the Balfour Declaration, the British Prime Minister, in which he announced that the Britain could grant the Jews the right to establish a national homeland for themselves in Palestine, and it would strive to achieve this goal. When Britain was weak in fulfilling the wishes of the Jews, it left the matter in the hands of the United Nations, which was held by the United States until the present time,
which in turn assumed the British role in the Arab region.
The United Nations sent its committees to Palestine, and the committees decided to divide Palestine with Jewish planning and American pressure. The decision to partition Palestine between Muslims and Jews was announced on 29/11/1947, after it became certain that the Jews were able to control all of Palestine, and indeed, the Jews declared their state, which America recognized only 11 minutes later. Russia proceeded in recognition until the Arab armies entered into a war against Israel in 1948, and after that, the series of Israeli attacks on Arab lands, not only Palestine, began. Although Israel is an occupying entity planted in the middle of the Arab lands, it's supported by the United States of America and Europe for political and military reasons. And despite the ugliness of the massacres that Israel carried out in Gaza over the past years, the countries of the world turned a blind eye to the brutality what the Zionist entity dealt with civilian children in Gaza, whose number of martyrs reached 5,000 martyrs and 15,000 injured in just 2 weeks.
America may be one of the countries that most calls for freedom, democracy, and peace. However, its support for Israel during it shows its true nature. This is what we saw in the news during the past period, between the dismissal of employees who sympathized with the Palestinian cause.
This is also the 2 days that passed an Algerian young man was murdered. His colleagues threw him from the 6th floor because he objected to the aggression on Gaza, and many of the positions that we saw in Western countries from the hour the attack on Gaza began. Politics is always a dirty game. Western countries always see that the human lives matter, but in Gaza the word and democracy close its eyes. It closes its eyes to the hospital bombing. It closed its eyes to the killing of the children, women, and the elderly. Are those in Gaza countries not human beings? I can tell you what the United States and European countries are doing. What is happening in Gaza is terrorism itself. The killing of civilians, infants, and the elderly has never been a justification for anything. Where are human rights and international civil society organizations from what is happening? What is strange? If anything happens to anyone in any country, these organizations will issue a statement, condemn, and turn the world around. But in Gaza and Palestine, everyone is silent and blinded. What is happening is planned and arranged. This is what we saw in the Israeli calls, in which they asked the residents of Gaza to leave their homes and go to Egyptian Sinai. This is the same demand that was presented to President Mubarak in recent years. And now the time has come when they are trying to implement the Zionist plan again. And last but not least, I want to say in the end that the battle is not over and the war will continue. And the owner of the land will not leave their homes. And the years will pass and they will return to their homes and land again. Moreover, the course of the occupation will end. In addition to, Jerusalem will return to the Pearl of Cities and Palestine will return to us again.